I warned you. I'm not the fool you took me for. I'm a coder. Apparently, I'm the only man in Chicago who can't keep his wife entertained. Or so I overheard through the bedroom wall at 2 o'clock in the morning when Marissa thought I was asleep. Dan's just so ordinary, she whispered into her phone, probably to her sister Lisa. I mean, he fixes computers for a living. When's the last time that impressed anyone at a dinner party? I'm Dan Foster, 38 years old, and I've been debugging code longer than I've been debugging my marriage. Turns out marriages don't come with error logs that tell you exactly where everything went wrong. If they did, mine would probably crash the system. My wife, Marissa, works in HR at some corporate firm downtown, the kind where they have motivational posters about synergy and serve kombucha in the break room. She's 34, ambitious in that sharp-elbowed way that makes other people step aside in elevators, and she's been growing more distant than a dial-up connection. The real kicker, her golden boy cousin, Scott Pierce, had moved back to town 3 months ago. Scott's one of those guys who posts shirtless gym selfies with captions like, "Crushing Monday," and somehow makes a living as a lifestyle consultant, whatever the heck that means. He drives a leased BMW, wears cologne that costs more than my monthly grocery budget, and has the kind of smile that makes you want to check if your wallet's still in your pocket. Scott's opening his own fitness center, Marissa announced over breakfast, not looking up from her phone. He's asked me to help with the business side, you know, since I actually understand professional networking. The dig wasn't subtle. It never was anymore. That's great, I said, spooning cereal into my mouth. I'm sure he needs someone who knows how to file paperwork and schedule meetings. She looked up then, eyes flashing. It's more than that, Dan. It's about building something meaningful, creating a brand. You wouldn't understand. I wouldn't understand, right? Because apparently keeping the city's computer networks running was just playing with toys in a basement somewhere. That evening, I was working late in my home office when I heard Marissa on the phone again. Our house isn't that big. A modest 3-bedroom in Lincoln Park that we bought when we still used words like we in our future without irony. He's just so passionate about everything, she was saying. When Scott talks about his vision, his eyes light up. When Dan talks about servers and databases, I want to take a nap. I saved my work and closed the laptop. Through the thin wall, I could hear her laughing, actually laughing at something the person on the other end said. When was the last time I'd made her laugh like that? The answer was depressing enough that I decided to grab a beer instead of calculating it. My best friend Cliff owns a bar called Murphy's about 10 minutes from my house. It's the kind of place where the peanuts are free, the beer is cold, and nobody judges you for showing up on a Tuesday night looking like your dog died. She's cheating on you, Cliff said without preamble when I slumped onto a bar stool. He's got this annoying habit of cutting straight to the point, probably from 20 years of listening to people's problems while pouring drinks. She's not cheating, I said. She's just finding herself. Apparently, herself is somewhere I'm not invited. Cliff, who's built like a linebacker and has the emotional intelligence of a therapist, slid a beer across the bar. Dan, I've seen this movie. It doesn't end with you two renewing your vows in Hawaii. It's her cousin, Cliff. They're just working together. And I'm just serving drinks to pay for my yacht. I wanted to argue, but the truth was sitting in my stomach like a lead weight. The late nights, the hushed phone calls, the way she'd started dressing up for business meetings that seemed to happen at wine bars and trendy restaurants. 2 weeks later, the shoe dropped. Not metaphorically, literally. I came home early from a client site to find a men's size 12 Nike running shoe by our front door. I wear size 10, and my running days ended sometime during the Clinton administration. I stood there for a moment, key still in the lock, listening to the sound of my marriage officially ending. Upstairs, I could hear voices. Marissa's laugh again. In a deeper voice, I recognized as Scott's. "This is perfect," Scott was saying. "Dan's always at work. He'll never suspect anything." "I know," Marissa replied. "He's so wrapped up in his little computer world. Sometimes I wonder if he'd even notice if I disappeared entirely." Well, I was about to find out. I didn't storm upstairs like some wronged husband in a bad movie. Instead, what I did what any self-respecting IT professional would do. I gathered intelligence. Over the next 3 days, I installed a few discreet security cameras around the house, all perfectly legal since it was my house, too, and started documenting everything. Times, dates, license plate numbers. Scott's BMWs was becoming a regular fixture in my driveway, usually showing up around noon and leaving before I got home from work. The really pathetic part, they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. "I'm having dinner with Lisa tonight," Marissa announced on Thursday, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. She was wearing a black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. "Tell Lisa I said hi," I replied, not looking up from my laptop. Through my phone, I watched Scott's BMW pull into the driveway 15 minutes after she left. That's when I decided to get creative. Friday morning, I called in a favor with my buddy Marcus, who works for the city's parking enforcement. By lunchtime, Scott's BMW had 3 parking tickets and a boot on the front wheel, courtesy of some mysteriously expired meter payments I may have hacked into and adjusted. When Scott called Marissa in a panic, I was listening through the baby monitor I'd strategically placed in the kitchen. "This is harassment," Scott shouted. "Someone's targeting me." "Calm down," Marissa said. "It's probably just bad luck. 3 tickets in one morning and now I can't move my car." "This isn't luck, Marissa. This is warfare." He wasn't wrong. That evening, Marissa came home fuming. "Scott thinks you're sabotaging him." I looked up from my dinner with the most innocent expression I could manage. "Me? I've been at work all day. Why would I sabotage Scott?" "I don't know. Maybe because you're jealous of his success. Jealous of a guy who can't figure out how the parking meters work. That's a low bar, even for me." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning. She was starting to suspect, but she couldn't prove anything yet. The next phase of my plan required backup, so I called in reinforcements. My old college roommate, Jake, who now worked as a private investigator, and my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who had the best view of our driveway and a healthy appreciation for neighborhood drama. "You want me to photograph your wife's affair?" Jake asked when I explained the situation. "I want you to document her pattern of deception," I corrected. "For legal purposes." "Right. Legal purposes," Jake grinned. "This is going to be fun." Mrs. Chen was even more enthusiastic. "That woman parks her car crooked every single day," she said, adjusting her glasses. "And her boyfriend's music is too loud." "I'll be happy to help." By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to wallpaper the house. Photos, timestamps, audio recordings of Marissa lying about her whereabouts, but I wasn't ready to play that card yet. Instead, I decided to let them hang themselves. Sunday morning, I made coffee and sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. When Marissa came downstairs, I was typing furiously, occasionally chuckling at the screen. "What are you working on?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "Oh, just updating my LinkedIn profile," I said casually on. "You know, networking, building my professional brand." She paused, coffee mug halfway to her lips. "Since when do you care about networking?" "Since I realized I might need to make some changes in my life, fresh start, new opportunities, that kind of thing." I could feel her watching me as I typed. The beautiful thing about being married to someone for 8 years is that you know exactly which buttons to push. "What kind of changes?" she asked. "Well, I've been thinking about the house. It's pretty big for just one person, don't you think?" The coffee mug hit the counter a little too hard. "One person, hypothetically speaking." I looked up at her with a smile. "I mean, if someone were to say, find themselves suddenly single, they might want to downsize. Maybe get a nice downtown condo, start over." Marissa's face went pale. "Dan, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I've learned a lot about myself lately, about what I want, about what I'm willing to tolerate." I closed the laptop and stood up. "I'm going to Cliff's." "Don't wait up." I left her standing in the kitchen, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was winning. The thing about revenge is that it's like coding. You have to be methodical, patient, and always think 3 steps ahead. One wrong move and the whole program crashes. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Marissa and Scott get sloppy. They started meeting at his apartment, a overpriced loft in River North that screamed midlife crisis. They went to restaurants in broad daylight, holding hands like teenagers. Scott even posted a photo on Instagram of 2 wine glasses at some trendy place downtown with the caption, "Great company makes everything better." The idiot was practically documenting the affair himself. Meanwhile, I was building my case. Jake had gotten me photos of them entering and leaving Scott's building together. Mrs. Chen had recorded Marissa's lies about working late. I had bank statements showing charges at restaurants and hotels on days when Marissa claimed to be at business meetings. But I wanted more than just evidence of the affair. I wanted to understand the full scope of their betrayal. That's when I discovered the real plan. I was going through Marissa's laptop. She'd left it open on the kitchen counter, logged into her email when I found the messages between her and Scott. Not love letters, but something much more interesting. Business correspondence. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to steal my money. "The house is worth at least $400,000. Marissa had written. "In Illinois, I'm entitled to half of everything in a divorce, plus alimony since he makes more than me." Scott's response was even better. "Perfect. That'll give us enough to expand the fitness center. We can buy the building next door. Maybe open a second location." They were spending my money before they'd even stolen it. But the really infuriating part was the next exchange. "What if he fights the divorce?" Scott asked. "He won't," Marissa replied. "Dan's too passive. He'll just roll over and accept whatever I tell him. He always does." Too passive, right? I screenshotted everything and sent it to Jake. Then I called my lawyer. "How much evidence do you need for a divorce in Illinois?" I asked. "Depends on what you're trying to prove," said Jennifer Walsh, the attorney who'd handled our house purchase. "Illinois is a no-fault state, so adultery won't affect the division of assets. But if you can prove financial misconduct or deception, what kind of deception? Hiding assets, planning to dissipate marital funds, that sort of thing." "Why?" I told her about the emails, about Scott's business plan funded by my half of everything. "That's interesting," Jennifer said. "Forward me those screenshots, and Dan, don't let them know you're onto them. The longer they plan, the more evidence we'll have." So, I played dumb. I came home every evening, kissed Marissa on the cheek, and asked about her day. I listened to her lies about client meetings and late projects. I nodded sympathetically when she complained about being stressed at work, all while documenting every deception. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later when I overheard a phone conversation that changed everything. I was in my office supposedly working when Marissa took a call in the living room. She thought I couldn't hear her, but the acoustics in our house are better than she realized. "Lisa, I need you to do me a favor," Marissa said. "If anyone asks, I was with you last Tuesday night. We went to that new wine bar in Lincoln Park." Lisa, Marissa's best friend since college, a woman I'd considered family, laughed. "Another alibi, girl, you're playing with fire. It's fine. Dan doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy with his computers to notice what's happening in the real world. What about when you leave him? Won't he figure it out then? By then it won't matter. Jennifer says I can get half of everything plus alimony. Scott and I will be set." "Wait, Jennifer. My Jennifer. Your lawyer friend is sure about this?" Lisa asked. "Positive. She's handled dozens of these cases. The key is to make it look like Dan's fault somehow, like he was neglectful or emotionally manipulative." My stomach turned cold. They weren't just planning to take my money. They were planning to destroy my reputation in the process. I grabbed my phone and called Jake. "I need you to do some research on Jennifer Walsh," I said. "Find out if she has any connection to my wife or Scott Pierce. Your lawyer, Dan, what's going on? I think I'm being played by more people than I realized." Jake called back 2 hours later. "You're not going to like this," he said. "Jennifer Walsh and your wife went to the same college. They were sorority sisters." The pieces clicked into place. Jennifer had been feeding information to Marissa from the beginning. Every legal strategy one discussed, every piece of evidence I'd mentioned, it had all gone straight back to the other side. I was fighting a war where the enemy knew all my moves before I made them. But now I knew something they didn't. I knew they were working together and I had a plan. The beautiful thing about being underestimated is that people stop watching you carefully. They assume you'll keep doing what you've always done, reacting the same way you've always reacted. They were wrong. First, I fired Jennifer Walsh. I sent a brief email citing irreconcilable differences in legal strategy, and hired David Kim, a divorce attorney Jake recommended. David was young, hungry, and had no connection to anyone in Marissa's circle. "Your wife's been planning this for months," David said after reviewing all my evidence. "The good news is that she's documented most of it herself. These emails about spending your assets on her boyfriend's business, that's called dissipation of marital funds. It's going to cost her." "How much?" David smiled. "In a case like this, she might end up owing you money." Next, I had to deal with the friends who'd been helping Marissa lie to me. Lisa was the obvious target. She'd been providing fake alibis and probably knew about the affair from the beginning. I decided to pay her a visit. Lisa worked at a marketing firm in the Loop, the kind of place where everyone wore expensive suits and talked about disrupting industries that were working fine already. I showed up at her office on a Tuesday afternoon carrying a manila envelope and wearing my best innocent expression. "Dan," she said when I appeared at her desk. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to thank you," I said loud enough for her coworkers to hear. "Marissa told me how you've been covering for her while she's been going through this difficult time." Lisa's smile faltered. "Covering for, providing alibis while she meets with her therapist. All those evenings at wine bars and restaurants talking through her problems." I leaned closer and lowered my voice conspiratorially. "The affair counseling must be really helping. She seems so much happier lately." "Affair counseling?" Lisa's voice cracked slightly. "Oh, didn't she tell you that's what she's calling it? She said you've been helping her practice what to say when she finally confronts her feelings for Scott." I straightened up and smiled brightly. "Anyway, I just wanted you to know how much I appreciate you helping my wife work through her emotional infidelity. It means a lot to have friends who support the marriage." I left Lisa sitting at her desk, mouth open, while her coworkers pretended not to stare. By the end of the day, half her office would know that Lisa had been helping a married friend cheat on her husband. But the real confrontation was still coming. That evening, I came home to find Marissa, Scott, and Lisa sitting around my kitchen table like they were planning a military campaign, which in a way they were. "Dan," Marissa said, not looking up. "We need to talk." "Sure," I said, setting down my laptop bag. "What's on your mind?" Scott cleared his throat. He was wearing a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, and his hair was styled with enough product to waterproof a deck. "Dan, man, this is awkward or hard, but we think it's time to be honest." "Honest about what?" "About the fact that your marriage is over," Scott continued. "Marissa and I have developed feelings for each other, real feelings, and we think it's better for everyone if we stop pretending." I looked around the table at the three of them. Lisa was staring at her hands. Marissa was trying to look defiant, but mostly looked nervous. Scott was attempting his best sincere expression, probably the same one he used to sell overpriced gym memberships. "Wow," I said finally. "This is really happening." "We don't want to hurt you," Marissa said. "But we can't help how we feel." "Of course not," I agreed. "Feelings just happen, right? Like parking tickets and security cameras and private investigators." The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. "What are you talking about?" Scott asked. I opened my laptop and turned it toward them. On the screen was a folder labeled Evidence containing about 50 files. "I'm talking about the fact that I've been documenting this affair for 2 months, I said calmly. "Photos, audio recordings, bank statements, emails, including the ones where you two plan to spend my money on Scott's business expansion." Marissa went pale. "You've been spying on us?" "I've been protecting myself." "There's a difference." I clicked on one of the audio files. Marissa's voice filled the kitchen. "Dan's too passive. He'll just roll over and accept whatever I tell him." "You recorded me?" Marissa's voice was shaking now. "I recorded you lying to me repeatedly while planning to steal my money and destroy my reputation." I looked at Lisa with help from friends I trusted. Lisa finally looked up. "Dan, are you what?" You didn't know it was wrong to help a married woman lie to her husband, or you just didn't care. It's not that simple, Lisa said weakly. It's exactly that simple. I closed the laptop. But here's the thing. I'm not actually angry anymore. I'm grateful. They all stared at me. I'm grateful because you've shown me exactly who you are. All of you. And now I know exactly what I need to do. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter where I had left a stack of papers earlier. Marissa, these are divorce papers. I'm filing for dissolution of marriage based on irreconcilable differences with a petition for unequal distribution of assets due to financial misconduct. I handed her the papers. Scott, this is a restraining order. You're not welcome in my house anymore. I handed him his papers. And Lisa, this is just a photo of you and Marissa at Scott's apartment last week. In case you want to explain to your husband where you really were when you told him you were working late. The silence stretched out for nearly a minute. Finally, Scott stood up. You can't prove anything. I smiled at him. Scott, I'm an IT professional. Proving things with data is literally what I do for a living. This isn't over, he said. You're right. I agreed. It's not. The thing about people who think they're smarter than you is that they keep making the same mistakes even after they know you're watching. 2 weeks after our kitchen confrontation, Scott and Marissa were still meeting regularly, still planning their future with my money, and still underestimating what I was capable of. They had moved their meetings to a coffee shop in Wicker Park, probably thinking they were being clever. What they didn't know was that the coffee shop's owner, Mike Rodriguez, was one of my clients. His point-of-sale system had been hacked 6 months earlier, and I'd spent 3 days rebuilding his network security. Mike was happy to let me set up a discreet recording device near their usual table. I can't believe he actually filed for divorce, Marissa was saying on the recording from Tuesday morning. I thought he was bluffing. It doesn't matter, Scott replied. Jennifer says he can't prove financial misconduct just because we talked about using the money for the business. Talking isn't a crime. But what if he has more evidence? Like what? He's a computer nerd, not a detective. The worst he can do is make us look bad in court. They still didn't get it. They thought this was about money and property division. They had no idea what I was really planning. The next phase required more help. So, I called in every favor I'd accumulated over 15 years in it. My network of contacts included everyone from bank security specialists to social media managers to the guy who ran the city's traffic camera system. By Friday, I was ready to launch what I privately called Operation Scorched Earth. It started small. Scott's gym had a website that I'd helped design 2 years earlier, back when I still thought he was just Marissa's harmless cousin. I still had administrative access to the hosting account. On Saturday morning, visitors to Pierce Fitness Solutions were redirected to a page featuring Scott and Marissa's greatest hits, photos of them together, audio clips of their conversations, and a detailed timeline of their affair. The headline read, "Is this your personal trainer? Know who you're trusting with your fitness goals." Scott's phone started ringing before 9 a.m., but that was just the appetizer. The main course was served at Scott's big fitness center launch party that evening. He'd rented a space in River North, invited potential clients and investors, and planned to announce his expansion plans. I arrived fashionably late, wearing my best suit and carrying a tablet loaded with presentation software. Dan. Marissa spotted me near the entrance. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting local business," I said cheerfully. Scott invited the whole neighborhood, right? The party was everything I'd expected. Overpriced catered food, a DJ playing music loud enough to damage hearing, and Scott working the room in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I waited until he started his official presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Scott announced, standing in front of a large projection screen. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm excited to share my vision for the future of fitness in Chicago." He clicked his remote to advance to the first slide. Instead of his business plan, the screen filled with a photo of him and Marissa kissing in his apartment doorway. The room went dead silent. Scott frantically clicked the remote, but each slide was worse than the last. Photos, email screenshots, audio transcripts. 3 months of documented deception projected in high definition for everyone to see. "This isn't," Scott started to say, but his microphone had been connected to my tablet. Instead of his voice, the speakers played the recording of him saying, "Dan's too stupid to figure out what's happening. We'll take him for everything he's worth." That's when the room erupted. Potential investors headed for the exits. Clients demanded explanations. Someone started recording with their phone. Scott's business partner, a guy I'd never met, but who'd apparently invested $50,000 in the expansion, cornered Scott near the bar and started shouting about fraud and misrepresentation. In the chaos, I slipped out the back exit and drove home. Marissa was waiting for me in the driveway, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "How could you do that?" she screamed as I got out of my car. "You destroyed him. You destroyed everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I said calmly. "I just showed people who Scott really is, who you really are." "This is insane. You've lost your mind." "Have I? Let's see. I trusted my wife and she cheated on me. I trusted my friends and they lied for her. I trusted my lawyer and she was feeding information to the other side." I walked past her toward the front door. The only insane thing I did was wait this long to fight back. She followed me into the house, still shouting, "You can't just ruin people's lives because you're hurt. Watch me." I went to my office and started packing my computer equipment. I'd already found a new apartment downtown, the kind of place I'd always wanted, but never got because Marissa preferred the suburbs. "Where are you going?" she demanded. "Away from you." I unplugged my monitors and wrapped the cables. "The house is going on the market Monday. Your lawyer, your real lawyer, not Jennifer, will get the paperwork. You can't sell the house without my permission." "Actually, I can. It's called a partition action. Look it up." I carried the first load of equipment to my car. "Oh, and Marissa, you might want to find a new job. I sent your HR department some interesting emails about conflicts of interest and personal conduct." Her face went white. "You didn't." "I did. Turns out using company resources to plan your affair was a violation of your employment contract." "Who knew?" I made 3 more trips to the car, loading everything I cared about. Marissa stood in the driveway, watching me dismantle the life we'd built together. "This isn't over," she said as I loaded the last box. "You're right," I agreed. "It's not." The final confrontation came 3 weeks later on a Thursday evening in November. And I was in my new downtown apartment, a sleek 1-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the lake when my building's doorman called. "Mr. Foster, there's a woman here demanding to see you. She says she's your wife." "Send her up," I said. I'd been expecting this visit. Marissa had lost her job the previous Monday. Turns out our departments take a dim view of employees who use company email to coordinate extramarital affairs. Scott's fitness center had folded after his investors pulled out, and he'd been forced to move back in with his parents in Neatville. The divorce proceedings were going exactly as David Kim had predicted. I was keeping the house, the savings, and my retirement accounts while Marissa was getting her personal belongings and a lawyer's bill she couldn't afford. She looked terrible when I opened the door. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Sure." She walked into my apartment and looked around at the modern furniture, the organized space, the complete absence of anything that reminded me of our marriage. "Nice place," she said bitterly. "I like it." She turned to face me, and I could see she'd been crying. "Dan, we need to talk." "About what?" "About ending this, about calling off the lawyers and the divorce and all of this revenge." I sat down on my couch and gestured to the chair across from me. She remained standing. "I'm listening," I said. "I made mistakes. I know that. But what you've done to me, to Scott, to my career, it's gone too far." "Has it? You've destroyed my life." "No," I said calmly. "You destroyed your life. I just made sure everyone could see it." She started pacing, her voice getting higher and more desperate. "I loved you, Dan. I really did. But we grew apart and I got confused and I made some bad choices." "You didn't make bad choices, Marissa. You made deliberate choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie to me for months. You chose to plan to steal my money. You chose to involve our friends in deceiving me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? You were going to take half of everything I'd worked for, give it to your boyfriend and destroy my reputation in the process. Did you think I'd just smile and sign the papers? She stopped pacing and stared at me. You used to be a good man. I'm still a good man. I'm just not a stupid man anymore. The Dan I married would never have done what you did to Scott. That presentation humiliating him in front of all those people. The Dan you married trusted people who didn't deserve it. I interrupted. The Dan you married believed that being decent meant letting people walk all over him. The Dan you married thought that if he just worked hard and treated people fairly, they'd do the same for him. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. But you know what I learned, Marissa? Being good doesn't protect you from bad people. Being faithful doesn't guarantee that your spouse will be faithful. Being honest doesn't mean others won't lie to you. So, you decided to become like us. I turned back to her. I decided to stop being a victim. She was crying now. Real tears, not the manipulative kind she'd used her during our marriage when she wanted something. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. I know you are. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there were consequences. You're sorry that your plan didn't work. That's not true, isn't it? If I hadn't found out about the affair, if I just rolled over and accepted whatever divorce terms you offered, if Scott's business had succeeded with my money, would you be here apologizing? She didn't answer. Which was answer enough. The divorce will be final in 6 weeks, I said. After that, we never have to see each other again. What about forgiveness? What about second chances? I forgave you the first time you lied to me about working late. I gave you a second chance when I pretended not to notice Scott's car in our driveway. I offered you a third chance when I asked if there was anything you wanted to tell me about your relationship with your cousin. I walked back to the couch and sat down. You used up all your chances, Marissa. You used up all your forgiveness. And you did it while planning to destroy me. She stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down her face, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Not enough to change my mind, but enough to make me sad for the people we used to be. I should go, she said finally. Yeah, you should. She walked to the door, then turned back. Will you ever be able to forgive me? Someday, probably. When it doesn't matter anymore. After she left, I poured myself a drink and sat back down on the couch. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Scott's moving to Phoenix. Apparently, his reputation here is shot. I typed back, good. Another text, this one from David Kim. Divorce paper signed by the judge. It's official. Congratulations. I looked around my apartment, my space, my rules, my life, and realized I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The revenge was complete. Marissa had lost her job, her reputation, and her future was Scott. Scott had lost his business, his investors, and his standing in the community. Lisa had lost her marriage when her husband found out about her role in the affair. Even Jennifer Walsh was facing an ethics complaint with the State Bar Association. But more importantly, I'd found something I'd lost along the way. My self-respect. I raised my glass to the empty apartment and smiled. Here's to new beginnings, I said out loud. And better endings.